Hey everyone, it's Karen at Worldschooling Central. Do you wish you could travel more with your kids, get them out into the world and show them what it's really made of? Welcome to Worldschooling Spotlight, where I interview worldschooling families and share their experiences with you. Today I'm going to introduce you to a Canadian family who were worried about the limited view of staying in just one country. So they've been out exploring the world together as a family. Watch this to find out more. Christina Wagar were your typical Canadian couple who loved to travel and share their adventures. When they married and started a family, they made the bold decision to not only continue to travel, but to reach for even richer and more incredible destinations. 9 years after their first son was born, this passionate travel family have explored over 20 countries, 9 Canadian provinces and territories, and 14 US states. They focus their travels around culture, adventure, and education, finding with each new destination another piece of the puzzle that makes up humanity and the planet Earth. Along the way, the wandering Wagars have had their eyes open to just how diverse and beautiful our planet is, and they've made it their mission to share these experiences with other parents. Let's meet Dad Kevin now.
My name is Kevin Wagar. I run a website called Wandering Wagars Adventure Family Travel. Myself and my wife, Christina, along with our 2 sons, a 6-year-old and an almost 9-year-old, very close to 9. And we travel as often as we can.
And Kevin, why did your family start Worldschooling?
Before we had our children, and then when we had our children, my wife and I discussed travel a lot and said, are we going to allow this to continue and become a part of our lives once we have our children involved? And we both agreed that yes, that was important enough for us to do. So we've made it a priority, and using that as a platform to help teach our children about the world and politics and culture and adventure and experiences, and using all of those things to kind of build a larger platform for them to grow for knowledge and to experience more of what the world is like than what they could experience in a standard classroom. There are things that you can learn from travel that you could never learn from a book or from a school or from staying local. When we're lucky enough to live in a destination or in a place where we have a very high level of immigrants, and that makes for a really unique experience here. But all of those interactions with new friends and people that my children grow up with are all painted with that Canadian brush. You don't get to experience that life where you're the outsider and you're the one looking into the glass. And I think travel is really what helps take that position of self and make it into an understanding where you are a much smaller piece in a much bigger puzzle. And that brings forth a level, it humbles you, and it takes you into a position where you're more willing to learn from other people, and you're more willing to take their experiences and accept them for face value versus trying to instill your own painting on top of that.
And what does Worldschooling look like for your family?
My oldest son has now been to about 21 countries, I think, and we travel as often as we can. My wife still works a full-time job. My job is now the website as of about 8 months ago. And and since then, we're just increasing every year, more and more travel all the time. Our children are in school full time. They're in a French immersion course here in Canada, and we use travel to supplement that. There's no issues for us taking children out of school for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time in order to go to a destination and experience it to the best that we can. Because we are tethered to here in Canada, we're obviously limited to the amount of time that we can take. So what we try to do is make sure that those destinations that we do visit encompass as much experiential learning as we can. Everything's, hands-on. We're getting out into nature, and if we're doing a tour, we're learning about the animals, we're learning about wildlife, the nature, the people, the culture, the food, and hopefully every trip that we have, we come away with a deeper understanding, not only of the destination that we're visiting, but also of ourselves.
So, how often do you get to travel?
According to the people who are around us constantly, um, it's really hard to say because we juggle travel between long distance and local experiences. And I think everything is part of that travel experience. So we don't, if we go away for a weekend, which is very close to most weekends of the year, if we're home, chances are that we're probably gone during the weekends. And, we'll have local travel experiences either here in Ontario, or we'll take a quick flight for a 3 or 4 day weekend or something like that. And then usually 3, 4 times a year, we'll head off and go somewhere bigger and make it a larger travel experience. Lately, now that my children are a little bit older, my kids play hockey during the winter and they love it. So our winters tend to be a little bit more calm, but then during the summers calm is probably not the right word, but our but our summers, for example, last summer we were traveling almost constantly from end of June until the beginning of September.
And how old were your kids when you first started traveling?
He was 4 months old when we made our first trip, which was down to Mexico. And, he talks about it all the time still. But no, obviously he doesn't remember that trip, it's not about remembering the experiences and all that. It's about having the experiences and then the personal growth that you gain from it. And, he was 4 months old when we went to Mexico, 6 months when we went to Portugal. And then, trip after trip after trip after trip after that. And, each one opens up something inside you. So, it's kind of an idea that it's not about remembering the journey, but remembering the personal growth that you have while you're there.
But is it really worthwhile traveling with young kids? Will they remember?
I love that line, and I saw something. I think it was a meme or something like that on Facebook a while back that just summed it up perfectly. And I think it was yeah, they'll never remember the books that you read them as a child. So why read to them until they're going to remember? And travel really works along that same venue, where it's not about remembering those experiences in detail. It's about personal growth. And you will remember the moment that you overcame a fear, or you will remember the moment that you had to rely on your family because you were in a strange place and things felt weird. Or you will remember that time that a stranger came up to you and did something nice to you. And it's those moments that build up that personal confidence and growth and self-worth that travel really brings to the table.
How did you guys discover Worldschooling?
It's only through being involved in online communities like your own that we really started to understand the term, and we had a chance to sit back and look at what it was that we're doing and said, hey, wow, we're using travel to teach our children.
And what would you say are some of the benefits of Worldschooling?
Early on, when I started my website, I kind of set together 3 platforms that I wanted to build it on. And the 3 platforms that I decided that were the core of our travel experience were adventure, culture, and education. And I felt that any destination that we visited, if we could nail those 3 things, then we had an experience worth remembering. And you can go in, you can build yourself through the adventure, you can build an understanding of others through the culture, and then you can use your experiences there to learn more about yourself or about an experience or about wildlife or nature or landscape or geology or culture or whatever, because there's just so many things to learn. There's a limitless amount of knowledge out in the world. And so early on, even before I understood the term world schooling, that was set up as one of our principles for traveling.
And how did friends and family react when you started world schooling?
Luckily for us, nothing but positive reaction. We have never had a situation where anyone looked at us and said, "Oh my gosh, you're taking your kids out of school," or this or that. No, it's always been, "Wow, that's incredible. I really wish I could do that with my children." Or, we might have had, "Are you sure you want to go to that destination? Is it really safe?" We have had some of that, but usually a few words of explanation will call that off. But yeah, no, our family is incredible. They're super supportive. In fact, as often as we can, we try to get them involved in it. We'll travel with my wife's parents or her family, or we'll bring, my mom's been on a few trips with us, and we're looking at maybe getting my dad out on a couple of trips, and we'll see how it all goes. And I think that all becomes part of the fun.
Kevin, what questions and fears did you have about world schooling before you started?
I had all the concerns. I don't think there is. I still have concerns all the time, and I think that's natural. If you don't have concerns, you're probably not a parent, because I think parenthood is just a whole ball of concern. Um, but luckily we had traveled a fair bit before we had our children, so we were experienced enough to understand what the world was like. Um, when we first started traveling, we overpacked and did everything, because you never know exactly what's going to happen. And then luckily, as life goes on, you change your habits, and now we're flying off to Egypt in 4 days, and we're doing I think 18 days in Egypt on a couple of carry-on bags, and that's about it. So but yeah, I mean, there was always concerns about safety, about cleanliness, about food. um, and they're valid concerns, especially in a lot of places. Luckily, experience comes into play when you're dealing with it, so that you can understand what is safe and what is not, what will make you sick and what might make your children sick, how many diapers you might need to carry. It's always more than you think. And but yeah, and we tapped into communities. We tapped into communities like yours to say, "Hey, we're going to this place, and is there anything that we have to worry about?" And back then, when we first started traveling, I think Facebook and all that really wasn't the network of humans that it is now. But still, there's always people who have been to that destination. Chances are someone who's been to that destination with a child at the same age as yours. And it's pretty awesome to think that, like, we don't live in a world where you're the only one doing something. You might be the only one doing it your way, but there's other people who have knowledge that you can tap into. So we've been lucky that way. But concern is natural, and don't be afraid to ask the questions, because what concerns you might not be the same things that concern other people.
So, what hints and tips do you have for travel with young kids?
Traveling with little kids is a very different ball of wax than traveling with older children. Um, we do a lot of outdoor stuff, and so hiking and exploring has always been a big part of how we travel. We've learned a lot about pace, making sure that not necessarily the destinations that we visit, but the pace at which we visit them is accommodating to them. So if we go for a hike, the whole idea or the rules that I put in place were, I'll never hike farther than I can carry my kids back, because it's happened, and I've had disasters. I was interviewed on a radio station here in Canada because it was I had such a horrible, disastrous hike that was completely awful. The hike was incredible. The view, some of the best photos I've ever taken were from this hike, but I never should have taken it. It's a terrible idea. But basically, we went on a 10-kilometer hike, and it was great. First 5 kilometers were to the destination, and then the last 5 kilometers back. We got there just in time to watch the sunset, except we were supposed to have started the hike at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And instead, we started it at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we weren't supposed to be there at sunset. And so we weren't prepared. We had no flashlights. We had no anything. And then I ended up having to hike back. Luckily, there was a full moon that night. But my mom was with us, and she wasn't in the best health. And we didn't end up getting back to the car until about 1 o'clock in the morning. So the hike back, my youngest son, who was 3 years old, as soon as we turned around to walk back, I put him up on my shoulders and he fell asleep. And luckily, my older son, who was 5.5, I think at the time, managed to do the whole hike and ended up back. And thankfully, because I don't think I could have carried him, because I was also almost having to carry my mom back. And but pace and preparing and making sure that you understand the outcome of every situation before you get into it is always big. But I think the real value with traveling and with younger children is understanding their openness to other people and embracing that, because children are often the best inroads that you can have to meet people when you're traveling. And I have never had better conversations than I have traveling with young children, because most people love them and they want to meet them, and meeting the children gives you an opportunity to meet them. So embrace that connection, embrace that love that people have of young children, because it'll make for some of the best memories that you'll ever have.
And tell me, how do your kids learn through travel?
Education on the road is all about the experience. It's about letting them have as many experiences as they can and getting as deeply involved in those as we can. Every year we'll take a trip that they have chosen for themselves, something that they're passionate about. This year it's Egypt. Last year, or I guess last summer, we went up to Churchill, Manitoba to see the polar bears. The couple of years before that, we went to Argentina because my youngest son really loves penguins. So we went and visited the world's largest continental population of penguins. It's outside of Antarctica. And so that's all part of it. I mean, we find out what they're passionate about, and then we'll build something around what it is that they love. And because of that, they get so much more out of the trip. They're part of the planning, they're part of the experience, and they also have the ability to learn what they want to learn, something that they're really interested in. And if a child is engaged in something, they're going to soak absolutely everything.
And what accommodation do you prefer while traveling?
We'll stay pretty much anywhere. For us, accommodations are generally an afterthought. They're something that we need to sleep in between experiences. So as long as it's clean and has a bed, it's usually okay with us. What we do love, though, is when an accommodation is an experience in and of itself. Those make for the ones that we will really go all out for. I know one that stands to mind right now is Inca Terra Machu Picchu Pueblo. So beautiful hotel just at the just outside the train station in below Machu Picchu, and the hotel itself is beautiful. It's really nice grounds, nice restaurant, all that. But that's really not what makes it special. What makes it special is they have all these activities there that make the hotel an experience of itself. They have scavenger hunts for children where they can go and they can learn about the local plants and the hummingbirds and The flowers and the tea. They have their own tea plantation. You can go out and you can learn to pick and grind and dry your own tea. They have a rehabilitation facility for spectacled bears. And you can go there and you can see the bears that they've rescued and are trying to figure out if they can release them back into the wild or not. And all of this at a hotel. And that's something you don't see very often. So if we can stay at a hotel that's an experience of itself, that's amazing, because so many awesome learning opportunities. But if it's just a place with a hotel, that's fine. We'll just sleep there and get up and leave in the morning.
And how do you afford to World School?
The way I look at travel is, and my wife is completely on the same page as me, is that it's all about what you prioritize. For us, travel has always been a priority. So we don't buy a lot of stuff. We don't eat out a lot. We don't, we budget things as best as we can in order to ensure that we can have those experiences that we want to have. Everyone is obviously very different, and the people, generally I find that the people who can't afford to travel are the ones that have prioritized other things in their lives. They may not realize that they prioritize those things, but they have prioritized them. Because travel doesn't have to be in vast, uncharted lands. It doesn't have to be a trip to Egypt or to the Bahamas or to Disneyland or wherever. It could be to a new city. It could be a new hiking trail. It could be a new food experience or something in your own hometown. It's all about what you make it. And if you start with the small things and you find that you love it, then you're going to want to try to do those bigger things. And so it's just about priorities. Introduce yourself to it, introduce your family to it and your kids, and see what happens.
Do you guys choose to buy travel or trip insurance?
I don't think we would consider traveling without travel insurance and health insurance, because it's the downside of not doing that is A, very expensive, and B, could be incredibly devastating. We are lucky enough that we have insurance that covers us when we travel, which is great. But there's generally we'll look at travel insurance itself, for flights and things like that, and we'll take that as a case by case basis. But we would never travel without having supplemental coverage for our health, because it could just be a horrible experience.
And what medical needs have you had whilst you've been traveling?
We've been lucky enough not to have any major injuries, and hopefully it stays that way for the foreseeable future.
So, Kevin, what's next in your world schooling adventures?
Next immediate plan is our travels to Egypt. So we're leaving just this coming Friday and going for 18 days. It's going to be absolutely awesome. It's our first dip into Africa, our second time in the Middle East, and we're so excited. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Our kids are now listening to the audiobooks, the Rick Riordan audiobooks. The new series he has is all about the Egyptian gods, which is pretty cool. But beyond that, it's for me at least, it's navigating this new structure where I am looking at my travels not only as an experience, but also as something that I need to do for my income. So I've been navigating, how to build my website and continue to make money on it, and working with destinations and navigating all that structure that was at one time just something I never even quite realized existed. I also started up a group here in Toronto that requires attention. So four of us started up a group of content creators in Toronto that is all about taking people like myself and them and building a community around it where we can help each other grow and learn and work with destinations and things like that. And then, more often speaking with people like you, where we can talk about family travel and educate people on the fact that it's a way bigger thing than a lot of people recognize. And I find that to be a super incredible thing to do, to be able to share that message and say, oh yeah, there's not only people that are traveling, but there's people that are traveling with children, and not just bringing them to Disney World or Cancun or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with those destinations, but there's a whole wide world of incredible places and incredible experiences that are out there that will not only not hurt you to visit, but will inevitably make you a better person.
And where can we find you online?
I run a website called Wandering Wagars Adventure Family Travel. That's WAGARS. And wanderingwagars.com is a website. On it, you'll find inspiration and resources, a lot of resources for traveling to destinations, what to do, where to see, what to eat, where to stay. We try to take that discomfort that you were mentioning earlier and ease that by showing you that A, people have done it, and B, this is how they did it. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but it's something to go by. We're on all the major social channels at Wandering Wagars, and you can find us there. And if you do, please say hello, because we love to talk to people.
And finally, what would you say to someone who is considering world schooling?
I would say try. Find something that interests you and make it a priority, because if your kids see you following your passions, then they're going to learn that they can follow their passions too. Your travels don't necessarily have to be the passions that they have, but it sure instills in them a sense of trust and honesty in themselves that they can go off and do the things that they've always wanted to do without being afraid.
To find out more about the Wagar family, visit their website using the link below this video. To stay up to date with everything we do at Worldschooling Central, be sure to subscribe to our channel, and if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. To learn more about worldschooling and what you could do with your family, visit www.worldschoolingcentral.com.